Hotel manager threw water in a black woman's face. He thought she was just another guest. But when her husband walked in and the entire staff realized who she really was, the whole hotel froze. Grand Crest Hotel, one of the city's most prestigious establishments. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting ripples of light across the gold-trimmed walls. It was the kind of place where the scent of wealth hung in the air, and where appearance mattered more than truth. Naomi Brooks stepped through the glass doors, dressed simply but elegantly, a cream-knit sweater, dark jeans, and her hair pulled back into a sleek bun. To any outsider, she looked like just another guest walking in from the autumn drizzle. But Naomi carried herself with a quiet confidence that drew subtle stares. She wasn't here for luxury. She was here for her husband. Earlier that morning, Jonathan Brooks had told her he'd be visiting one of his company's recently acquired properties, the Grand Crest, to assess staff performance before an upcoming relaunch. He asked Naomi to stop by unannounced to see how the staff treated ordinary guests. Jonathan believed true hospitality was revealed when no one was watching. Naomi smiled at the thought as she approached the front desk. Behind the counter stood Robert Hale, the hotel's general manager, tall, polished and proud. His gold name tag gleamed under the chandelier light, but there was something brittle in his smile, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Robert greeted, his tone polite but faintly condescending. "Can I help you?" "Yes," Naomi replied softly. "I have a reservation under the name Brooks." Robert tapped the keyboard, his smile fading as he scanned the system. "I don't seem to have a reservation under that name. Are you sure this is the right hotel?" Naomi kept her calm, positive. "My husband booked it directly." From the corner, Clara Jenkins, the head receptionist, shifted uncomfortably. She recognized Naomi from the framed photo that had arrived with the ownership transition documents, but she said nothing. Robert had already begun to show his true nature, and Clara knew better than to interrupt his performance. Robert's eyes flicked over Naomi's outfit, casual, rain-specked, unadorned. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "I think there's been a mistake, ma'am. Our rooms start at $800 a night. Perhaps you meant the City Inn down the street." The words hung in the air like a slap. A few guests glanced over, sensing tension. Naomi inhaled deeply, her jaw tightening, but she refused to lose composure. "Could you please check again?" she said quietly. Robert sighed dramatically, muttering, "Fine," as he turned back to the screen. Seconds later, he shrugged. "No record. I can't hold up the line for false bookings." When Naomi didn't move, he reached for the phone. "Security?" Before he could dial, Naomi took a calm step closer. "There's no need for that," she said. "I'll wait." Robert's irritation flared. He grabbed a glass of water from the counter, muttering under his breath, "Some people never know their place," and, in a sudden flash of arrogance, tossed the water across the counter, drenching Naomi's face and sweater. The sound of liquid splashing was followed by gasps from the lobby. Naomi froze, water dripping from her chin, her blouse clinging to her skin, as Robert stood there breathing heavily, half shocked at his own action but too proud to back down. "You can leave now," he said coldly, "before I call the police." For a long moment, Naomi said nothing, her eyes locked on his, not with rage, but with something far deeper, disappointment. Around them, whispers spread like wildfire. At that moment, Jonathan Brooks stepped out from the elevator. He had just finished a quiet meeting with investors upstairs. The scene before him stopped him cold, his wife humiliated, his employee standing with a smirk. "Naomi?" he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Robert turned, annoyance twisting into forced politeness. "Sir, please excuse the scene. This woman was." Jonathan raised a hand. "This woman," he interrupted slowly, "is my wife." The room went dead silent. Robert's face drained of color. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Dylan, the assistant manager, backed away, his eyes wide. Jonathan stepped closer, his tone calm but lethal. "You just threw water on the owner's wife. Would you like to explain to everyone here why?" Robert's lips trembled, searching for words that wouldn't come. The entire staff and half the guests were now watching. Naomi wiped her face with dignity, her voice steady. "He didn't believe I belonged here." Jonathan turned to the crowd, then back to his manager. His silence was more powerful than a shout. After a moment he said quietly, "We'll finish this in my office." But Robert's fate was already sealed. As Naomi followed her husband toward the elevator, she didn't look back. The hotel lobby, moments ago filled with chatter, now felt like a courtroom. And everyone had just witnessed the opening statement. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, sealing Naomi and Jonathan in a small bubble of tense silence. The hum of the elevator filled the air as it rose toward the executive floor. Naomi kept her gaze fixed on the digital display above the doors, watching the numbers climb. She didn't say a word. Jonathan's reflection in the mirror behind her looked unreadable, his posture calm but his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched at the edge of his cheek. He had never been a man of quick anger, but this wasn't a matter of pride, it was personal. Naomi finally spoke, her tone even but heavy. "I didn't want to cause a scene, John. I tried to keep it quiet." He turned to her, eyes softening instantly. "You didn't cause anything." "He did." Jonathan reached into his pocket, pulling out a handkerchief, dabbing gently at her cheek. "You handled it with more grace than he deserved." Naomi sighed, shaking her head. "I didn't expect this, not from your own staff. He didn't even check properly. He just saw me and decided I didn't belong." Jonathan's lips pressed into a thin line. "And that tells me everything I need to know about how this hotel has been run before we took over." His voice dropped lower. "I wanted to see how they treated guests. I didn't expect them to test my patience by humiliating my wife." When the elevator doors opened to the executive floor, two assistants waiting by the hallway immediately straightened. Jonathan's presence commanded respect wherever he went. At 42, he had built a reputation as a visionary businessman, calm, deliberate, and impossibly composed even under pressure. But today, his composure carried an edge of steel. "Have Mr. Hale sent to the boardroom," Jonathan instructed coolly. "Now." The assistants exchanged a nervous glance and hurried off. Naomi hesitated before following Jonathan down the hall. "John," she said softly, "don't ruin your day because of him." He stopped mid-step and turned to her. His eyes held a quiet storm. "Naomi, this isn't about my day. It's about what he represents. If a man like that can disrespect you in public, imagine how many others he's mistreated when no one was watching." Naomi's heart clenched. She knew that tone. It was the same one he used when confronting injustice in the boardroom or when standing up for employees no one else defended. Inside the boardroom, sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the polished mahogany table. Jonathan motioned for Naomi to sit. She refused. "No," she said quietly. "I'll stand. I want him to see me exactly as I am." Moments later, the door opened. Robert Hale entered, his posture stiff, his face pale. He had changed his tone completely, his arrogance replaced by forced humility. "Sir, Mrs. Brooks," he began quickly, "this is all a misunderstanding. I didn't realize—" Jonathan raised a hand. "Stop." His voice was calm but firm, slicing through Robert's excuses. "Before you say anything else, I want to understand something. What exactly did you not realize?" Robert blinked, searching for footing. That she was important. Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Important," she repeated. Robert stammered. I mean, I thought she wasn't. She didn't look like a regular guest, and we get people walking in here sometimes pretending to—" "Pretending to what?" Jonathan asked quietly. Robert swallowed hard. To belong, that word hung in the air like poison. Jonathan's eyes darkened. "And what made you decide my wife didn't belong, Mr. Hale?" The manager's voice faltered. "It wasn't personal. I just, based on her clothes, her tone." Naomi folded her arms. "My tone?" she echoed. Robert looked at her helplessly. "You seemed out of place." Jonathan stepped closer, voice low but steady. "You poured water on her face because she seemed out of place?" The room fell silent. Outside the glass walls, a few staff members had quietly gathered, whispering, sensing something monumental unfolding inside. Robert's attempt at composure crumbled. "Sir, please, I've served this hotel for 15 years. I made a terrible mistake. I'll apologize publicly if that's what you want." Jonathan turned slightly, glancing toward Naomi. She stood tall, her wet blouse now faintly dried, but the humiliation she endured lingered in every corner of the room. He took a deep breath. "You will apologize," Jonathan said. "But not because I told you to. You'll do it because you owe it to every person you've disrespected without consequence." Robert nodded rapidly, tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. "Yes, sir." Of course, sir. Jonathan straightened his cuffs. Then you'll do it downstairs, in the same lobby where you humiliated her, in front of your staff. Robert froze. Sir, please. No, Jonathan interrupted firmly. That's where this ends. Naomi looked at her husband, her voice soft. Jonathan. He met her gaze, and for a second she saw past the businessman, the husband who couldn't bear to see her wronged. He did this in public, Jonathan said quietly. He'll make it right in public. Robert's face turned pale, his breath shallow, but deep down, Naomi knew this wasn't just about punishment. It was about accountability. Jonathan looked out the window toward the lobby below. The staff were already beginning to whisper, sensing something big was coming. Call everyone, he said finally. Meeting in the main lobby. Now, and just like that, the hotel, once proud and polished, was about to witness the moment its mask came off. The murmurs began spreading across the marble floors long before Jonathan and Naomi stepped off the elevator. Word travelled fast in luxury hotels, especially when the owner himself called for an all-staff meeting in the middle of the day. Housekeepers paused mid-shift, bellhops lined up near the front desk, and receptionists whispered nervously to each other. The air buzzed with curiosity and dread. Nobody knew exactly what was coming, but they all knew it had something to do with the soaked woman and the general manager's sudden pale face. Robert Hale stood near the desk where it had all happened only an hour earlier. His hands shook slightly as he straightened his tie, trying to appear composed. He could feel the stares, the quiet judgment of the staff he had commanded for years. Many of them had suffered under his arrogance, but none had ever dared to speak up. The elevator chimed, all heads turned. Jonathan Brooks stepped out first, his expression calm but cold, the kind of control that made people instinctively move aside. Behind him walked Naomi Brooks, elegant even in her simple clothes, her composure unshaken. The faint watermarks still visible on her sweater were a silent reminder of what had happened. The crowd fell silent as Jonathan approached the center of the lobby. The piano music had stopped, even the air seemed to hold its breath. Everyone, Jonathan began, his voice steady but commanding, thank you for gathering on such short notice. He looked around slowly, meeting the eyes of every employee, from the young bellboy gripping his hat to the senior concierge shifting uncomfortably behind the counter. I've owned this hotel for 2 weeks, he continued. In that time, I've learned a lot about its history, its reputation, and the people who keep it running. Some of you have been here for years, building what makes this place remarkable. A few nodded quietly, unsure where he was going. But today, Jonathan said, his tone tightening, I learned something else. He turned slightly toward Robert, who looked as though the floor beneath him might open up. I learned, Jonathan said clearly, that a guest, someone you're paid to serve with respect, was insulted, humiliated, and assaulted in this very lobby, not by a stranger, not by an intruder, but by one of my own managers. A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Whispers rose, only to be silenced by Jonathan's next words. Mr. Hale, he said, turning fully now, do you have something to say? Robert's throat worked as he stepped forward. His voice was thin, cracking under the weight of dozens of eyes. I want to sincerely apologize to Mrs. Brooks, he said, forcing the words out. I was wrong. I made an assumption about her that was unacceptable. It will never happen again. Naomi stood still, her hands folded in front of her. She didn't gloat, didn't flinch. Her eyes met his, steady and composed. Jonathan nodded slowly. You're right. It won't happen again. Robert blinked, confusion flickering across his face. Sir? Jonathan took a step closer, his voice lowering but somehow carrying even more power. Because you're done here, Robert. The room froze. Jonathan continued, his tone measured. For years you've hidden behind your title, treating guests and staff like they exist to serve your pride. That ends today. You're relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Robert's lips parted, disbelief washing over him. Sir, please. I've given this hotel 15 years of my life. And yet, Jonathan replied coldly, it only took 15 seconds to reveal who you really are. The silence was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Robert looked around, searching for an ally, but found none. Clara Jenkins, the head receptionist, lowered her gaze. Dylan Marks, his assistant, stepped back, quietly relieved. Naomi finally spoke, her voice calm but unwavering. You didn't just disrespect me, Mr. Hale. You disrespected everyone who's ever been judged for how they look before being allowed to prove who they are. Maybe today you'll finally understand what that feels like." Her words landed heavier than any punishment Jonathan could give. Robert's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though whether to her or himself no one could tell. Jonathan gestured to security. "Please escort Mr. Hale off the premises." The two uniformed guards stepped forward, gently but firmly guiding him toward the doors. As he passed through the lobby for the last time, the staff he once belittled stood silently watching. No one smiled. No one spoke. When the doors shut behind him, Jonathan turned back to the team. "Let this be a reminder," he said. "Respect isn't about titles, uniforms, or money. It's about decency. From this moment on, this hotel will operate under one rule: every person who walks through those doors deserves dignity." Clara stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Brooks?" Jonathan looked her way. "Thank you," she said softly, "for standing up for what's right. We've all wanted to say something for a long time." Jonathan's expression softened slightly. "Then say it," he replied. "From now on, no one here should be afraid to speak up. If you see something wrong, fix it. Don't wait for someone else to do it." Naomi looked around the room, the same lobby where she'd been humiliated hours ago. Now it was transformed, heavy with reflection and quiet redemption. She reached for Jonathan's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. He looked at her, the faintest hint of a smile breaking through his composure. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded. "Better now. You didn't just defend me, John. You changed this place." And as the staff slowly returned to work, something had shifted. The Grand Crest Hotel had just learned its most valuable lesson, not about service or profit, but about humanity. When the doors of the Grand Crest Hotel finally closed behind Robert Hale, a wave of uneasy silence lingered in the air. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim, as though the building itself needed a moment to breathe after years of tension. The staff slowly returned to their stations, but their minds were elsewhere, on the sight of their once feared manager, being escorted out like a guest who had overstayed his welcome. Naomi Brooks stood near the marble staircase, still processing everything that had happened. Despite Jonathan's calm control of the situation, she felt a deep ache in her chest. The humiliation had been public, but so had the justice. Still, she couldn't shake the sting of those words. Some people never know their place. Jonathan, meanwhile, was surrounded by whispers of respect. Every employee who had ever been belittled by Robert Hale had just watched the hotel's new owner dismantle a decade of silent arrogance with a single speech. But Jonathan wasn't celebrating, he was reflecting. As Naomi started to head toward the elevator, Clara Jenkins, the head receptionist, stepped forward hesitantly. Her voice trembled slightly. "Mrs. Brooks? I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have spoken up earlier. I recognized you from the ownership photo, but—" Naomi turned, offering a small smile that softened Clara's guilt. "You don't have to apologize, Clara. Fear makes people quiet. I understand that." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Still, you didn't deserve that. None of it." Naomi placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then promise me one thing. Next time someone is treated unfairly, whether it's a guest, a colleague, or anyone else, don't stay quiet. Speak up. That's how places like this truly change." Clara nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "I promise." Jonathan approached then, slipping his arm around Naomi's shoulders. "Ready to go upstairs?" Naomi nodded. Together, they took the elevator up to the penthouse suite, the one Jonathan used as his temporary office while overseeing renovations. The door shut softly behind them, and for the first time that day, silence felt peaceful. Naomi sank into the velvet armchair by the window. The city glowed below, neon lights reflecting off glass towers and the soft drizzle misting the streets. She stared out for a long moment before whispering, "Do you think I overreacted by staying quiet?" Jonathan shook his head, sitting across from her. "You handled it perfectly. You gave him every chance to correct himself. What happened next was entirely his doing." "But what about the hotel?" she asked quietly. "Won't this scandal hurt its name?" Jonathan exhaled, leaning back. "No, it'll rebuild its name, with integrity this time. I'd rather run a smaller, honest business than a large one built on prejudice." Naomi smiled faintly, her husband's conviction always grounding her. Yet part of her still wondered how many others had endured the same quiet cruelty without a voice to defend them. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Jonathan frowned. "Come in." It was Dylan Marks, Robert's former assistant. He looked nervous, holding a white envelope. "Sir, I'm sorry to disturb you," he began, "but this was left on your desk downstairs. It's from Mr. Hale." Jonathan exchanged a wary glance with Naomi before accepting the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter, short, unsteady, and raw. "Mr. Brooks, I know my apology in the lobby wasn't enough. For years, I've led with pride instead of empathy. I believed my title made me untouchable. Today proved me wrong. I disrespected your wife, not because of who she is, but because of what I refused to see in myself, ignorance. If there's any grace left for a man who's lost his way, I hope you'll find it in your hearts to forgive me. I'll spend whatever time I have left learning from this. I'm truly sorry." Robert Hale, Naomi read over Jonathan's shoulder. Her heart softened slightly. "At least he understands now," she said quietly. Jonathan folded the letter carefully, setting it on the desk. Maybe losing what he thought he controlled is what he needed to find humility. For a moment, they both sat in silence, the rain pattering softly against the windows. Then Naomi smiled faintly. "You know, Jonathan, I didn't come here expecting a lesson in leadership." Jonathan chuckled softly. "And I didn't expect to witness a war in my own lobby." Naomi's smile faded into something gentler. "You handled it with grace, John. I've never seen anyone command a room like that. You didn't just fire a man. You restored something deeper." Jonathan reached across, taking her hand. "You restored it, Naomi. I just followed your example." Just then, his phone buzzed, a message from the hotel's social media manager. Naomi could see the headline already spreading across local platforms: "Hotel owner fires manager after racist incident. Wife revealed as victim." Jonathan sighed. "Well, it's out." Naomi tilted her head. "Does that bother you?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Not at all. Let the world see what accountability looks like." She smiled softly, leaning back in her chair. "Then let them see." Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance, but inside the penthouse there was only calm. Naomi felt lighter, not because revenge had been served, but because truth had been seen, and for the first time that day, the city lights below looked like a reflection of something brighter, justice glowing quietly in the rain. By the next morning, the Grand Crest Hotel wasn't just a luxurious building, it was headline news. Across social media, local news sites, and even national channels, a single video clip was going viral, the moment Jonathan Brooks, the hotel's composed and commanding owner, publicly fired his manager for soaking his wife, Naomi Brooks, in the lobby. What no one expected, however, was the tone of the coverage. Hotel owner stands against discrimination, black woman humiliated in five-star hotel, but her husband's response changed everything. Grand Crest Hotel sets new standard for accountability. The world, it seemed, had been waiting for a story like this, one where justice didn't arrive years later in a courtroom, but instantly, in front of everyone. Naomi sat at the breakfast table in their penthouse suite, scrolling through the news on her tablet. The comments section was filled with thousands of messages. Some applauded Jonathan's leadership, others wrote about their own experiences with bias and unfair treatment. She read one aloud, shaking her head in disbelief. "I was denied a room here 2 years ago because I didn't fit the profile. I'll finally visit now that it's under new management." Jonathan walked out from the adjoining room, freshly dressed in a charcoal suit, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I've seen the reports," he said, pacing near the window. "No, we're not suing him. I don't need his downfall. I need reform." "Yes, schedule the press conference for noon." When he hung up, Naomi looked up from her tablet. "A press conference?" Jonathan nodded. "We can't just let this go viral and move on. We need to show that we're serious about changing how this hotel, and every one of our properties, operates." Naomi leaned back, a soft smile forming. "You really don't stop at justice, do you? You have to rebuild the world around it." He smiled faintly. "It's not enough to fix one wrong if the system stays broken." Downstairs, the hotel buzzed like a hive. Reporters gathered near the entrance, cameras flashing every few seconds. Staff moved with renewed purpose, and for the first time in years, there was an energy of hope, a feeling that things were truly different. When the clock struck noon, Jonathan and Naomi descended the grand staircase together. The sound of cameras clicking echoed off the marble. Clara stood among the front desk team, watching with pride as her new employers faced the world with calm dignity. Jonathan stepped up to the podium placed at the center of the lobby, the same spot where Robert Hale's downfall had taken place. This time, instead of silence, the room was alive with anticipation. "Good afternoon," Jonathan began, his voice echoing with quiet authority. "Yesterday, an incident occurred in this very lobby, an incident that revealed something ugly, not just in this building, but in society itself." He paused, glancing toward Naomi. She nodded, encouraging him silently. "A woman, my wife, was treated unfairly because of how she looked," he continued. "That's not a hotel problem. That's a humanity problem. And as long as I own this place, no one, no matter their color, status, or income, will ever be made to feel like they don't belong here." The crowd erupted in applause. Naomi stepped forward next, taking the microphone. Her voice was gentle but filled with power. "What happened to me happens to countless others every day. People without cameras, without a voice, without someone in power to stand up for them. This isn't just about me, it's about every person who's ever been told, you don't belong here." The lobby went silent again, every face turned toward her. Even the reporters, usually ruthless, seemed moved. Naomi continued, her tone unwavering. "This hotel will now launch a new initiative, the Guest Dignity Program. We'll train every staff member across all our properties to recognize and challenge bias in all its forms. Because true hospitality starts with respect." Jonathan looked at her with quiet pride. This wasn't just about making headlines anymore. It was about rewriting the future of their company, together. When the press conference ended, the applause lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling. Guests who had witnessed the previous day's confrontation now approached Naomi one by one, offering their support and gratitude. An elderly white woman reached out gently, tears in her eyes. "I saw what he did to you, dear. I wanted to say something, but I froze." "I'm sorry." Naomi smiled warmly. "You're saying something now. That's what matters." As she walked away, Jonathan turned to his PR director. "Make sure every hotel under our brand receives this training immediately," he said firmly. "And add one more thing. All complaints about discrimination, no matter how small, come directly to my desk." "Yes, Mr. Brooks," the director replied. Later that evening, as Naomi and Jonathan sat together in the quiet lounge, she rested her head on his shoulder. "You know," she said softly, "I think we turned the worst day of my life into something bigger than both of us." Jonathan wrapped an arm around her. "That's what you do with pain, Naomi. You either let it scar you or let it teach you." Outside, the evening sun dipped below the skyline, painting the city in gold and amber light. And somewhere between those colors, justice and grace met, perfectly balanced, quietly powerful. The next morning, Naomi woke up in the penthouse suite, the one she had once been denied access to, sunlight pouring through the sheer curtains. Her face was calm, but her eyes still carried the weight of what had happened. Ethan stood near the window, already dressed in his dark navy suit, watching the city move far below. "Today," he said quietly, "we're going to do things properly." Naomi rose, dressed in an elegant cream blouse and gold earrings, the same dignity she carried even when she was humiliated. She nodded. No shouting, no revenge, just truth. When they descended to the lobby, it was busier than ever, guests checking in, staff bustling around. The air was filled with a familiar scent of polished marble and expensive cologne, yet there was tension. Everyone knew. The rumor had spread overnight, the new owner was coming. Robert Hale straightened his tie nervously behind the front desk. He hadn't slept. He'd tried to convince himself the woman from yesterday wouldn't say anything, that maybe she was bluffing. But when he saw Naomi walk through the golden doors, escorted by Ethan, his mouth went dry. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," Ethan said evenly, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Good morning, sir," Robert stammered, forcing a smile. Are you here for an inspection?" Ethan didn't answer. Instead, he looked around. "Everyone, may I have your attention?" The staff froze. Even guests turned to watch as the couple stood in the center of the lobby. Naomi's calm grace contrasted sharply with Robert's unease. Ethan continued, "Yesterday, one of my guests was publicly disrespected, humiliated, splashed with water, mocked in front of others." His voice grew firmer. "And the person responsible was a man I trusted to represent this establishment." Robert's face turned pale. "Sir, if I may explain—" "You'll have your turn," Ethan interrupted sharply. "But first, everyone deserves to hear what happened." Naomi took a small step forward. The room fell silent. Yesterday, I came here as any paying guest would. I was ignored, questioned, and finally assaulted because of how I looked. Her voice trembled, but she stood tall. I wasn't treated like a customer. I was treated like an inconvenience. A murmur spread through the room. Clara Jenkins, the head receptionist, lowered her gaze in shame. Dylan, the assistant manager, clenched his fists, angry but proud she was speaking. Robert finally snapped. "I didn't know who you were. You can't just show up without notice and expect special treatment." Ethan's eyes turned cold. "So respect only comes with status? You think you can treat anyone less than human until you find out who they know?" Robert stuttered. "Sir, please." "No," Ethan said firmly. "I built this hotel brand on dignity, inclusion, and service. You spat on all of that." Then Ethan turned toward the gathered staff, his tone rising. "Let this be clear. No position, no title, and no years of service excuse prejudice or cruelty." He looked back at Robert. "You're fired, effective immediately." The entire lobby gasped. Robert blinked in disbelief. You can't do that." Ethan stepped closer. "I can, because I own this hotel. And you, Mr. Hale, have no place here." Security moved in quietly. Robert tried to protest, his words dissolving into incoherent excuses as he was escorted out. The moment the doors shut behind him, silence filled the air, heavy yet cleansing. Naomi exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, but Ethan took them gently, grounding her. "Sometimes," she whispered, "justice doesn't have to be loud." Ethan smiled faintly. "But it should always be seen." The staff began to applaud, softly at first, then louder. Not for revenge, but for respect. Clara stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Brooks, on behalf of everyone here, I'm so sorry for what you went through." Naomi nodded, her expression kind. "Then make sure it never happens again. To anyone." The applause grew, echoing off the marble walls. Guests recorded the moment, and by the next day, the story of the hotel manager's downfall and the woman he had underestimated would spread everywhere. But for Naomi, it wasn't about fame, it was about dignity. As she and Ethan walked toward the elevator, hand in hand, the entire staff stood straighter, not out of fear, but out of newfound respect. The woman whose face had once been soaked in humiliation now walked through the same lobby like a queen reclaiming her throne. And this time, no one dared to look away. The following week, the grand lobby of the Sterling Royale Hotel looked entirely different. The tension that once clung to every marble column had melted into quiet admiration. Staff members now greeted guests with sincerity, not protocol. And though the chandeliers still shimmered, there was something even brighter hanging in the air: respect. Naomi Brooks stood at the same reception desk where everything had gone wrong. This time, she wasn't a stranger being judged. She was the woman whose voice had changed an entire culture. Clara Jenkins approached her nervously, holding a bouquet of white lilies. "These are from all of us," Clara said softly. "We wanted to thank you for not just standing up for yourself, but for standing up for everyone who's ever been silenced." Naomi smiled warmly. "Thank you, Clara. The way you've led the team since Robert's departure, it shows real growth. You're doing exactly what leadership should look like." Clara blushed, eyes glistening. "I just don't ever want anyone to feel small here again." Naomi nodded. "Then you're already succeeding." At that moment, Ethan Brooks entered the lobby, his presence commanding yet calm. He walked toward Naomi with that familiar steady confidence, the kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. "Everything ready for the press conference?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "but I still don't love the idea of making this public." Ethan smiled. "It's not about you, it's about setting an example. People need to see what accountability looks like." Within minutes, local reporters began arriving. Cameras clicked, microphones extended, and lights flooded the once quiet lobby. Naomi stood beside Ethan, unsure what to say. But when she looked around, seeing the faces of those who now admired her instead of dismissing her, she found her voice. "Last week," she began, her tone measured but heartfelt, "I was humiliated in this very place. Not because of what I did, but because of who someone assumed I was." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She continued, "Prejudice doesn't just break spirits, it breaks trust, communities, and workplaces, but it can also be healed when people choose courage over comfort." She looked at Ethan, who nodded in silent encouragement. I didn't come here to destroy anyone's reputation, Naomi said. I came here to remind us all what humanity looks like. The hotel staff standing behind me have chosen to change how they see and serve people. That's what matters. Applause filled the air. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing her poise and power. After the conference, as the crowd dispersed, Naomi walked toward the large hotel windows. Outside, the world looked the same, but it wasn't. Something inside her had shifted permanently. Ethan joined her, resting a hand on her shoulder. You handled that perfectly. She smiled faintly. I didn't plan to become a symbol, Ethan. I just wanted to be treated fairly. He nodded. And because of that, countless others will be. Just then, Dylan Marks approached timidly. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, I wanted to say thank you. I saw what happened that day and didn't speak up. I've regretted it ever since. Naomi turned toward him. You have a chance to do better now, Dylan. Use it. He nodded. I will. As they left the lobby together, Ethan guided Naomi toward the open terrace where the city skyline stretched endlessly. You know, he said, when I bought this hotel, I wanted to turn it into the most luxurious place in the city. She smirked. And now? Now, I want it to be the most respectful one. They both laughed softly, the tension of the past days finally lifting. A gentle breeze brushed against Naomi's hair as she looked at the horizon. It's strange, she whispered. He poured water on my face to humiliate me, but maybe that was the very thing that washed away everything fake in this place. Ethan squeezed her hand and revealed who truly runs this world, grace, not greed. Down below, the hotel entrance was busier than ever. Guests checked in, greeted warmly by staff who smiled genuinely now. And near the front desk, a new plaque gleamed under the lobby lights. It read, The Brooks Standard. Every guest deserves dignity. Naomi stared at it, her chest tightening with pride. You didn't have to do that, she murmured. Ethan shook his head. Yes, I did. This isn't just your story, it's a reminder to everyone who walks through those doors. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, Naomi leaned into his shoulder. Then maybe this hotel finally deserves its name. He smiled softly. The Sterling Royale. And with that, the woman once drenched in humiliation now stood as the living symbol of strength and change, her story echoing through every corridor, every whispered conversation, and every guest who would one day walk through the same doors. Because long after the scandal faded, one truth would remain unshaken. Grace doesn't just endure the storm, it rebuilds the world after it passes.